You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Republican infighting explodes as Trump demands they cancel vacation, based on an article by Thomas Kika. Trump is not asking the Senate to work, he is testing its obedience. The source of the fight. The basic story is simple. Trump wants Senate Republicans to cancel their August recess so they can push the Save America Act, a voting restriction bill built around his long-debunked fraud claims, and try to move a budget package tied to funding the Iran war. Senate GOP leaders say the math does not work, the votes are not there, and the conference is dividing under pressure. Power is the point. This is not a policy dispute, it is a power test. Trump holds the command position inside the party, and he is using it to force Republican senators to choose between institutional virality and personal loyalty. The Senate does not lack clarity here, it lacks independence. When a president can demand that lawmakers surrender recess to chase a dead bill and a politically toxic war financing package, the underlying fact is not confusion, it is subordination. The blame is already misdirected. The Hill frames this as Republicans fighting each other, which is true in the narrowest sense and misleading in the larger one. The real conflict is not among equals. Trump is the driver. Senate leaders are the enablers who keep trying to negotiate with a demand structure built on grievance, fraud, propaganda, and electoral manipulation. Their complaint is not that the agenda is immoral or authoritarian. It is that the votes may not exist. That is a cowardly standard for resistance. Voting restrictions as political revenge. The Save America Act is the clearest tell. It is presented as election administration, but the source makes its actual purpose plain to answer Trump's exhausted fraud narrative with stricter voting and registration rules. That is not governance. It is revenge politics dressed up as procedure. The bill exists to validate a lie, discipline the electorate, and keep the party locked into a permanent emergency over a stolen election fantasy that has already been debunked. The war funding tell. The Iran package is that other ugly reveal. Trump and his allies want to jam through a $95 billion proposal under the cover of reconciliation, even though John Thune says it lacks 50 Republican votes. That tells you everything about the party's condition. It can be dragged toward major foreign policy commitments without coherence, consent, or honesty as long as the branding is strong enough and the stakes are high enough. This is not disciplined conservatism. It is reactive factionalism with a budget score. The pattern beneath it. The larger pattern is authoritarian routine manufacture a crisis, demand institutional loyalty, and treat any procedural objection as betrayal. The Senate GOP is not being bullied into principle, it is being bullied into performance. And when these senators warn that cancelling recess will disappoint base voters, they are admitting the rebel audience. The point is not lawmaking. The point is signaling submission to a leader who uses legislative dysfunction as proof of domination. What this actually shows. Republican governance keeps collapsing into a familiar sequence. Trump invents the crisis, the caucus scrambles to obey, and institutional norms are repackaged as optional if they block the spectacle. Democrats, for all their own failures, remain the only institutional barrier with any consistent democratic function. The lesson here is not that Republicans are divided. It is that a major party has become structurally organized around obedience to a man who treats the Senate as a staging ground for fraud politics and coercive nationalism. That is the system working exactly as intended by the people running it. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article, with the automated voice of Arctic. Thanks for listening.